You're listening to In Sickness, a podcast about caregiving with Allison Breininger and Justin Bima. Good morning, Allison.
Hey, Justin. So you have been on your break. How many weeks now have you been on your break?
I've had 3 weeks of my break so far.
All right. 3 out of 12.
Correct.
And how's it going?
It's going well. It is. I mean, just feeling like, wow, 3 weeks have already passed is kind of, there's a little bit of like, oh, it's moving quicker than I would like. But also like, I still have 9 weeks and like trying not to stress out about the fact that time does move forward. And I can't really do anything about that. It does
tend to do that. Yes.
But yeah, it's been going well. As I think I said in the last episode, just having the amount of space and the weight of like work and the work stress and all of that was taking up in my brain and like cascading into like how I was physically feeling, like to have all that piece like gone for right now is pretty incredible.
Have you been able to just be like, boop, turn it off?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, I haven't. And I don't know why because I was concerned about like, am I going to be still like, how are things going with this project and like what, but I haven't. It's just been like other people are handling that. Nice. I don't have to think about that. Not my problem.
Well done.
So that's been really great. What I think surprised me and maybe shouldn't have surprised me is like, so all that piece is gone that was causing so much stress and anxiety, but like, I'm finding that anxiety is still very much still around. What I have noticed is that, like we talked about, I went through my TMS treatments and it felt like that really helped the depression, but also it felt like maybe work was kind of like drowning out any benefit that I had seen or like clouding my ability to really see how that had helped. But I feel now very much like I can tell that from like a depression standpoint, like I am doing better than I was. So like that's been a great thing to feel. Now, the anxiety is still very much, showing up on a daily basis. And, on the one hand, I wish that like everything could just be smooth and easy for this break. But like, I understand that that's not how things work necessarily. So like, that's been something talking to my therapist about as we've been talking through this break and like trying to be intentional during this time about like listening to my anxiety or like having more space to kind of interact with it. Yeah. And so like, I'm feeling anxious and what are the tools that I have? I have 5 minutes to like sit with it and see if it can shift at all. Or if I have, 2 hours, then that's kind of a different thing that I can, and kind of think through and practice and work on like building some of those pathways to work through that anxiety when I don't have all of this additional stuff weighing me down. And so like, that's kind of, I don't want to say goal for this break, but just kind of something I want to try to be intentional about and, use it as a time to kind of not just rest and relax and recharge, but also like this part of me is still there. How can I, now that I have more space, learn to kind of interact with that better?
Well, it makes me think so much about our last episode with Megan about trauma, right? And like, you have been through your caregiving and through your work stuff, just like pushing it all down so you can keep going, right?
Yeah.
And like, I think a huge takeaway for me with that is like, we store it in our bodies. There's no amount of talking that's going to make it come out. Like it's stored in our bodies. And at some point it needs to come out. And so it makes actually great sense that like, sort of like me, when I quit my job, that's when it came out because it was like, ta-da. So you have this break and your brain is like, oh, yes, yes, like finally I can come out. And not that it wasn't there before.
Right.
But now it gets a little more. So, I'm going to go back to my boardroom analogy, which doesn't work for everybody, but for me is golden. And so just thinking about like anxiety has sort of been at the table, but there've been so many other voices at the table that it's the whole time he's been like, hey, what about me? What about me? And now all these other voices of like work are quiet. They're like are in a different room, a different boardroom, like, and then anxiety's like, yes, it's my turn. Here I am. I get a voice. And so something I've been doing, and I'm sorry if I've said this a million times, I just think it's the coolest, is with this, it's called parts work.
Yeah.
It's just like literally asking the emotion what it needs.
Right.
So like quietly just saying in my brain, like, hey, anxiety, I see you. What's going on? What do you need? What do you need today?
Yeah.
What can I do for you? What are you looking for? Why are you here? And that has worked super well for me, because for me, great. Like, originally, like with panic was like, I need a voice. I need a seat at the table. And I was like, okay, or different things, that just to say like, what do you need? And just having that like conversation with that one emotion has worked really well for me. And so it's just something for you to think about. The other thing you can think about is, Megan talked a little bit last time about tapping.
Right.
And so even if I know people can't see me, but like if you cross your hands across your chest, like it kind of like you're making like a butterfly. So you put your thumbs together and then put your hands on your chest, right? And then you tap. So you go like tap. So like one wing at a time, like tap, 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 one wing. You know what I mean? Like left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand, sort of like under your collarbone. So if you do that tapping while you're having the conversation with anxiety, that's like sort of like a homemade version of this EMDR.
Interesting.
And so you can just be tapping and say, hey, anxiety, what's up? What do you need? And tap, 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 tap. Plus it feels really soothing, but it's doing something super cool in your brain while you're doing it. So I would just say, and I think for any listener, like if suddenly you're like, oh, I feel really mad about that. Because I think that's another thing that when we talked about trauma was having outsized reactions to things was one of her things. And so if you're sort of like, whoa, whoa, hey, anger, what's up? What you need? And you might hear like, well, I'm mad because a week ago I wanted to be mad and you didn't let me. So I'm going to be mad now.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing I'll just throw out there, just because I've learned so much about all of this in the last months doing so much work, is that because, I took a 4-week break.
Yeah. Right.
And I want to take a minute to be like, you and I are both like so fortunate that we were able to take breaks and that most people cannot. And we recognize that. Right. But I started to maybe 3 weeks in panic about like, the break is almost over.
Yeah.
What am I going to do when May 1st comes? And something that helped my brain was to think about, again, back to the boardroom, about like the agenda and to look at like the board agenda. And again, like maybe for other people, the boardroom, like that's not the picture they want. Maybe it's a baseball team or whatever you want. Right. For me, that's what it worked. And so to think about, okay, what's the agenda? And to be like, oh, the agenda for April 20th is not what's on the agenda for May 1st. Right. I get to think like that's a different day. And that is not the way my brain likes to work. It likes to worry about the future, but that has been helpful to be like, what's today's agenda? And to like look down and be like, oh, May 1st is way, way down there. That's not for today. So, and I don't want to make these sound like really simple and easy because they're not, but they're just like little tricks and tips that I've been trying to do that have felt helpful. So I'm just really glad though that you have this break and that you're able to enjoy the benefits of the TMS and the depression. That's just,
yeah, it's been really great.
Wow. That's awesome. Good. I'm so glad. Good. And you have done a couple of like trips and stuff. You went to Alaska.
Well, yeah, there was that. No, I just got back this past week. Was able to spend a few nights on the east side of the mountains with my family, camping alongside a lake. And again, just kind of disconnecting a little bit, spending time with the nieces and nephew.
Nice.
Which was great. So that was, for me, that was a pretty relaxing time. It's difficult, Sarah, with me not there, it's a little more difficult for part of it. Her dad was gone as well. So it was just her and her mom also, has some chronic health stuff. And so it's not as, she has to do a little bit more in those times. And so, she was pretty worn out. She was pretty tired and exhausted and ready for me to be back.
Yeah.
And that's always, a tricky transition to manage a little bit. Cause it's like, I'm coming off this break where I feel like it's not, also for me, knowing that she's not doing as well kind of cuts into how restful it can be for me. So there's a little bit of that, but then it's like, I get home and it's, she's ready for me to take things back over. And it's kind of like coming off vacation and like, okay, now you're right into, back into caregiving.
Right.
But, I think it's not, it's just sometimes it feels a little bit of a like 0 to 60 kind of thing, but it's also, I've lived that enough times that it's not the shock that maybe the first couple times it felt like it was. So I had that. I don't really have any other trips or break or things like that on the break. And so it's kind of going to be more just doing things locally. I have been able to get out and do some hiking, do some fishing. And so hoping to do more of those kinds of things as well in the coming weeks. And
it kind of reminds me when you said like you get home from your vacation, you're 0 to 60, is that like all of us working caregivers basically have 2 full-time jobs. Right. And so like, yes, you are on leave from your paid position.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you're just like sitting around painting your toenails, right? Like you have this other thing that could be a full-time job. I think that was something I realized on my break was like, oh my gosh, I'm still like, I'm not working at all, but just taking him to the doctor and taking her to the whatever and I'm still, my calendar is still full,
Right.
And so I think to recognize that like, you are like, quote, just doing your caregiving bit is enough. And so just to recognize that like, oh yeah, this plus 40 hours, or sometimes you're working way more than that during this project is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, good. I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
And I hope it continues to be relaxing and that you get some good time to hang out with anxiety and build some skills that once you get back into work, then that toolkit's even stronger.
Yeah. And we have some friends coming in from out of town in a couple weeks to visit, and that's going to be really exciting.
You do?
Yeah, we do. So we're looking forward to that.
Really? Who's that?
Yeah. Oh, you and your family.
Da, 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 da. Oh my gosh. 2 weeks from right now.
Yeah.
Not right now. 2 weeks from today.
Yeah.
We will be in the same room and I can't even handle it. So listeners, Justin and I have never met each other in person.
No.
Because we live on opposite sides almost, of the country. And we are just, So yes, my family has planned a vacation, which is also a big deal. Because I haven't been on an airplane since pre-COVID.
Right.
And we're going to the Pacific Northwest. And one of the reasons is so that we can be in the same room together. So I'm so excited. So listeners, watch out. You will see a lot of photo documentation of this meeting because it will be a beautiful, beautiful thing to be together. So excited.
We're really looking forward to it. So
yeah.
Can't wait. What about you now? How is how the past few weeks been going at the Breininger house?
Yeah. Pretty well, actually. I mean, it's summertime and we're trying to enjoy that. In Minnesota, because it's so cold most of the year, there's this kind of pressure around summer. Like, y'all better be out there.
We have that, but it's the rain and not the cold. But like when the sun's out, everyone's like, oh, we have to go enjoy it now.
Exactly. Yeah. So that can feel like a lot.
Yeah.
Like it can feel like, oh, it's 9:00. I'd really like to be in bed, but the sun is out. And I feel like I'm supposed to be out there because that's what people are doing.
Right.
And so that can feel like a lot. And I think also, we're, I'm a caregiver and he's, got extra stuff. And so like, we just aren't doing it. We don't do as much. Right. Plus there's still COVID still going on and all that. And so I think sometimes that's tricky because you see everybody out there like living their best life, doing their things.
Yeah.
And certainly we're doing some things, but like sometimes it's like, we're just at home. So the other night, Maya and 2 of her friends, it was so cute. They decided to get all fancied up and go to, wait for it, the Cheesecake Factory. Because when you're 15, apparently that is like the epitome.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. And so they all went to the Cheesecake Factory in their fancy dresses.
Right.
For dinner. But of course she can't drive yet. So then we're the drivers. And so we're like, okay, if we're dropping her off here and then we're going to have to pick her up later. So I looked and there was a movie playing at the movie theater next door. So I was like, okay, Sean, so let's go to this movie. And we were not, kind of saying, but it was like, okay, let's do this. This feels like a thing that people do, right? It's like drop her off, go to the movie, get some snacks, watch the movie, pick her back up, whatever.
Right.
And so we went into the movie theater and then they were like, there's only front row seats left. And we're like, oh, sit in the front row of this,
Mm-hmm.
And then we realized that also meant that the entire theater was packed full of people,
right.
Which was also not in our plans.
Not ideal. Yeah.
Nope. So then we're like, okay, just kidding. We don't want the movie tickets. So then we sort of sat there like, well, like now what do we do? Like it's Friday night and
right.
we're out here and we should do something, but I don't know, or to go to a restaurant, but that's still like we still haven't been doing a lot of like inside restaurants.
Yep.
Plus we're like, they're probably going to be at the cheesy like longer than we're going to want. And, and so it was really hot. So it didn't feel like let's go to a park. You kind of feel this pressure. Like it's like date night, like we should do something.
Right.
And then Sean's like, oh, I'm getting kind of tired. And so like, we haven't even started the date.
Yeah.
So in the end, we ended up ordering a pizza to come to the house. And then I said, as we're driving home, your job is to like do some research on what show we should watch. Cause I hate that when the food is there and then you're just like scrolling through Netflix forever, right? To find something. And then by the time you finish eating, you still haven't found a show. So anyway, so in the end, we ordered a pizza and watched like 2 episodes of a show and called it a day. But it made me think about this whole like, sort of like, how do you do like date night when you're a caregiver or when you're a person, has extra stuff and you can't just like zip out to the like, hey, let's go on a 5-mile bike ride tonight as a date, or whatever that is. And so I know that you guys over the years have been super creative about that and thought that maybe that's something we could talk about and you could share some of the things that you have done, some sort of like not leaving the house kind of dates.
Right. Yeah.
So tell me like what's that look like for you guys?
Well, yeah. And one thing, I mean, we're talking about this in the context of like, this is a date night kind of thing, but it could be, I think there's importance to having, whether if you're caring for a parent, you're caring for a child, you're caring for, a friend, whatever your relationship is with that person, if you can, I think it's important to build things into that are not caregiving driven or not things that are not centered around the illness.
Good point.
For a variety of reasons. I think like one, it helps build your relationship and your connection with that person.
Yeah.
And kind of keeps it from being overly defined by the caregiver carry kind of role.
So true.
I think that another thing, like you're making memories that are not medical memories. Like when Sarah was in bed for 3 years, like she wanted to have things that she could look back on at that time that weren't the monotony of just day in and day out in bed.
Right.
Another thing, I was talking to Sarah kind of about this topic a little bit, and she had this great insight that, for her, people were, always we ask, hey, what's new? What have you been doing? And like, that was she dreaded that question because there was never any answer to that.
Yeah.
Nothing was new. She hadn't been doing anything. And so like, if we could fit in some activities that, worked within her constraints, like that gave her something to talk about and kind of be able to have a conversation with a friend and kind of have a jumping off point there.
I love that because I think that I see that often people don't know what to ask Sean because they can't say the like, how is work?
Right.
And then they ask him like, how was your last appointment?
Right.
Or when is your next procedure? It's like, well, that's not fun to talk about either. But then they just don't talk to him at all. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way, people.
Yeah.
So I love that building in little things, so that you do have those little stories. And I just really appreciate what you said about that because I think it's true with all relationships. And I think with spousal caregiving, it can feel like, am I the spouse? Am I the nurse? Right. And you're right that if like so much of your day gets filled with like the quote nursing type of stuff, then sometimes it's easy to forget like, oh yeah, you're also my husband. And we can talk about things that are not related to that, yeah. So I think that's and I think you're right for any relationship, whether it's with your kids or your parents or whatever. Like if you're going over to your mom's house and you're like, I'm going to like fill the med box, the pill box, but then you don't just get to like sit and enjoy and be like, hey mom, I think that's such a great insight. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Another thing that she mentioned was that it was a way for her to know that like the old her, the pre-sick her was still inside there. And like also to know that I still saw that person.
That's beautiful.
And to kind of have that connection with our life prior to this illness kind of coming in and taking things over.
That's really beautiful. Yeah. So how did you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say that like I think Sarah is the one that kind of has made sure that we're intentional about this. That's something that she's kind of comes up with ideas and plans, and like that's been great to have like that be something that she can take the lead on. I mean, rather than like feeling that pressure on myself to do that as well. And as far as how we did it, I mean, it's something that certainly has changed over the years depending on like her energy level. Like when she was in bed, the things we did were pretty limited, and they weren't always like a jointly beneficial, and it's not like they weren't always like a jointly enjoyable thing necessarily. Like for example, like for her, you know, we would sit in bed and like watch one of her like comfort movies. And for her, that was really meaningful to be able to like enjoy that with me. It was something, because it's a movie she'd seen 1,000 times. Like she doesn't need to like necessarily be fully present and taking it all in. But like that was something that for her, like that was a meaningful thing to spend time on. I got less out of that, you know, which is fine. For, you know, sometimes we would then, maybe we would sit on the couch and watch like a TV show. And that would be something, you know, she's doing that for me. Like it was difficult for her to not be in bed. But for me, it was also like good to have memories that weren't just of like her sick in bed and me just kind of sitting there next to her.
Right.
And then also like, you know, that was the time when she started sending mail to our nieces and now nephew. And so like I would help her with that. And that's kind of like the bed was the workspace. Like she would have, because I mean, that's where she was. And so like there would be, you know, cards and envelopes, you know, strewn over the whole bed. And like, again, that wasn't necessarily an activity that we both got the same amount of like joy out of. Not that I didn't enjoy doing it, but I was like, you know, doing it to help her. And so like, as you know, try to come up with things, particularly I think if the person you're caring for is limited, like there may be some give and take there as far as you know, find some things that alternate between something that one of you is more interested in than the other, or find some things, you know, if you can find some things too, that there's some mutual enjoyment as well. I think that helps, but to kind of, to start real small too. I mean, those were pretty minor things. As she got more energy, we were able to do a little bit more. I can think of a memory that came to mind as I was thinking about this, is she was still, I think at this point, pretty confined to being in bed. But, you know, we had this like monthly appointment that we went to, or we scheduled about an appointment a month because that's what she had the energy for. And so she really wanted to like, you know, we used to go out to dinner before she got sick, and we had some favorite restaurants. And she like, there was a dish at this restaurant in Bellingham that she was like, I would, you know, like to, let's do that. And so what that looked like for us, that was not going into the restaurant. You know, this is still when, you know, also for her to get in the car and drive or ride 30 minutes to Bellingham was an ordeal. You know, it was like bringing pillows, having an eye mask, having like noise canceling headphones. And so what we did was we finished the appointment. We called in a to-go order. We drove to the restaurant. I went in, we parked outside. I went in and picked it up, and we ate it in the car. Right outside the restaurant. And it was a unique experience. It fit within her energy level. It was memorable. It was meaningful to be able to like remember, you know, going there and all of that. And then we looked, and there was a bar that was, you know, we were parked in front of, and the door was open, and there was a skee ball machine in the back that we could see. And Sarah loves skee ball. She thinks it's really fun. It is fun. I enjoy it too. And so she's like, let's go in there and each do a round of that. And so like she got her walker out, and we went in there, and I mean, it was empty. It was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And we got some change from the bartender, and we each played around a skee ball. And it was, I have this picture of her doing it. And it was just this,
that's beautiful.
Just this real gift of like, it felt like a very normal thing to be doing kind of. And it was,
Oh, I love that. And it makes me think too, you can tell that our last episode really had an impact on me, because I feel like I'm making so many connections to that. But Megan talked about neutralizing places, right? And so you could have just been like, it's appointment day, and appointment day means this and this and this and this. But you added the date, right? The date thing to appointment day, so that the story you're telling is not like, and then we were there and but the story is like what happened on that day. And you're like, as long as we're out of the house, like here's this thing. And so to neutralize the trauma of that really hard thing that happened is so cool. And I love the spontaneity of like, there's a thing and it's little and it's, I think that's part of it. Like I have this neighbor who is like just fascinated in a weird way about the fact that Sean's life is the way it is. And so he's always asking questions around like, what does his day look like? And how do you plan? And I said, some of it has to be spontaneous. It has to be. And so he's like, oh, so like if he's having a good day, you're like, let's go to Wisconsin for 3 days. I was like, oh, no. not quite like that. But we had the other day, Sean, like all of a sudden had a burst of energy and he was like, let's get out of the house. And I was actually really tired, but I was like, nope. Like he has this burst of energy. We are going. Yeah. And so he's like, let's go to this park that we like to walk around. So we went and it was like hotter than blazes. And so we just kind of didn't work out so well because we kept trying to find shady spots, Right. And then we're like, okay, let's eat in the pavilion. And then so we did that and then we were done. And then he's like, well, now what should we do? Now let's go. Should we go see our new baby nephew? Sure. And so it's more, I think for us, we've had to learn to like, because planning is hard. I mean, I'm sure that's true at your house too. Like you never know how either of you are going to feel.
Right.
And so like when there's that moment, when I saw that spark where he was like, let's get out of the house. But even though I was kind of ready to hunker down for the night, I was like, nope, here we go. We're going.
Yeah.
Like he wants to get out of the house. Let's do it. And so that felt huge to be like, here we go. We're going to go to the park. We're going to go see the baby, and that sometimes that's the way it is. And that's more beautiful than like this sort of like manicured sort of like, okay, the night will be, you know what I mean? Like the spontaneity. And so like you guys seeing a skee ball machine and being like, there's a thing, we can do that right now. Let's do it.
Right.
Is I think something that is beautiful, but also like something, it's kind of a necessity for us. Right.
Yeah. I can certainly relate to the, like having a good day and needing to take advantage of it, like, and the spontaneity piece of that. And that's something that was difficult for me because I'm not really a spur of the moment person.
Right.
And so like the first time, like we went and like sat in a restaurant together and had a meal, after her being sick, like that was something that probably for several months we're like, we would like to do this thing.
Yeah.
And it was just, when is the day going to happen when she feels up to that? And it could be, and I don't remember the specifics, but it could have been like, maybe it was like 2 p.m. on a day. Like it could be that specific. And she's like, okay, let's do this now. And like, in those moments, like I maybe had plans for the day to like get these things done or feel like I had these obligations or something. And to have some flexibility there to be able to be like, no, I can set those aside for right now. And this is the priority. That was a shift that took some time. But I think for us, having something like kind of in our minds as like knowing that when the energy comes, this is what we're going to be doing, so that it's not, okay, she has the energy now, what are we going to do with that time?
Yes.
And not then sitting around like, oh, we could do this, we could do this. Right. That's been helpful for us to kind of have those pre-planned a little bit. And even on like a small level, I mean, this has been much more recently, like, we would go on sort of these like coffee dates, and it would be, the way we could do it is there would be like zero like barrier of entry for Sarah. Like she would be like, I have energy, but like I'm in my pajamas, I'm in my robe. Like we're just getting in the car, we go through the drive-through, pick up some coffee, go to like the local park and sit in the car and drink our coffee.
Yeah.
And to have something that is like a set thing that we know we can just do if she has energy. She doesn't have to spend time getting ready.
Right.
Wasting energy on that. We kept like a little box in the car with like some conversation starter kind of topic things. So like we would go through those while we were sitting there drinking our coffee. And it was, those were really fun and enjoyable moments. And just a way to get out of the house when so much of our time is spent in the house.
Totally.
Has been really great.
When you and I both live in really beautiful places where like we can go not that far and be at lakes and parks and that kind of thing. And I think that's true too, that sometimes I think if I can't be at Lake Superior, like, what's the point? Right. But that's like 2.5 hours away. And I forget that like I live in the land of 10,000 lakes. Right. So I can drive 10 minutes in any direction and be at a lake. Right. And so we've tried to do that as well, as like, we can't go to Duluth for the weekend, but we could drive 10 minutes, sit on a park bench and eat a sandwich. You know, when you said the thing about the conversation starters, I think that's so true, is that like, you know, we spend all day together. And so sometimes it's like, what if there's nothing new to say?
Right.
You know, it's not like I've been like at the office and I came home with a bunch of stories. And so one thing that I've had to sort of realize is like sort of this in early childhood, we call it parallel play, which is when like toddlers just like are doing their own thing next to each other and not engaging. Right. And I remember some good friends of ours from college who, one of their early Christmas letters said something like, you know, married life is great. And we're learning, one of our favorite things is something like reading in bed next to each other at night. And at the time, because we were much younger then, at the time I thought, well, that's not very like, you know, that doesn't sound very exciting. But now, I mean, I think like, but that's beautiful. Like, and Sean and I do that as well. Like every night, like it's one of my favorite things to do. And just you know, I think to realize that like you can have quality time with your person without being like, so let's talk. Right. That like we're right next to each other and we're enjoying the same space and we're both enjoying something that we're doing and we're together. And it doesn't have to be, there doesn't always have to be talk, because sometimes that is exhausting. Or even like finding a new, like we sometimes try to find shows, you know, that we both like. So then we can be like, oh, let's go watch the next episode, you know, and so it doesn't have to take energy, or it doesn't have to take money, or it doesn't have, you know, like, but I think again, that sort of neutralizing even the house, because I've been thinking that too. I love our house. And in the 6 years since we've been here, a lot of really hard things have happened in this house. Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, oh, are we going to have to leave this house sometime? Because, you know, hard things have happened and I don't want that to. So what are those little moments that you can also be like, oh, remember all those nights that we like laid side by side, like reading our books and, you know, giggling and showing each other this or that, or, you know, like keeping those, that it doesn't have to, like, when you think of date night, it doesn't have to be like, and then we got dolled up and then we went here and then we did that. And it helps, I think, that we're all getting older. So it's also that like less of that is happening with our peers anyway. I think a lot of our peers also like staying at home, which helps. So I think some of it is just like taking the pressure off of ourselves and being like, it doesn't have to be this like when I was like, oh, we didn't go to a movie. Instead, we ordered a pizza and stayed home. Yes. And, you know, like that was great. Yeah.
Yeah. We've certainly done a lot of like takeout and kind of that thing. And sometimes one thing that we kind of latched onto is there's a cheese shop nearby that does like a really fantastic like meat and cheese
charcuterie
spread. Yeah. And so we'll get this, you know, it comes in like a pizza box. We'll get that and then have some like champagne or sparkling cider or something like that. Yeah. Adding a little bit of something extra to kind of elevate it a little bit and make it's different enough too than like, you know, just getting dinner takeout, that it feels special. Yeah. And so like we'll do that to celebrate something or kind of have something like that. And another thing we've done is Sarah found this company, I think it's called like The Happily, and they do like these date boxes. And so we'll get like, you know, it'll have, you know, an activity, maybe like some conversation starter things, maybe like you know, one of them had some of the ingredients and we had to provide some of the ingredients, but it was like making this lemonade that when you mixed it together, it like changed color and it was kind of fun and interesting to do. Yeah. One of them had like macrame. So we learned how to do like a macrame plant hanger.
Fancy.
Very fancy. There was like an escape room kind of game in a box. And so just kind of and so like, I think they're intended to like, here's a box, you know, spend the evening doing all of this stuff in here. And, you know, certainly with her energy, that's something we spread that out.
Totally. Yeah.
But like having a couple of those on the shelf that like, again, it takes the pressure and planning off of like, there is energy available. What are we going to do with it? It's like, there's like to have those things on deck, I think is really helpful.
That's so smart. 'Cause you know, I'm married to an Enneagram 9, which means decision making is hard. And so it's true that I often get frustrated with nights like that because I'm like, what would you like to do? And he's like, what would you like to do? And I'm like, oh my gosh, we could just go round and round all night. And so I love that of sort of having a list of like, oh, you know what would be fun to do sometime, you know, this thing, and just sort of have a thing going. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I love that. I think that Sarah's so great at that kind of thing of like, it's like, I feel like she's always doing some sort of like make homemade guacamole, or like she's got like little like ideas, you know, and some of that stuff, you know, I'm sure those kits cost money, but some of those things that could certainly be done, you know, it's more the idea of
right.
Like,
it could be, you know, here's a cookie recipe. Like we're going to make that when there's available time.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking with some of these things, because one of the first things you said today was about like this, it doesn't have to be if it's your spouse. It could be if it's your kids or if it's your parents. Right. And so some of those things too, I can imagine that. I mean, I think probably if you're caring for your kids, you're doing some of this kind of stuff anyway, right? But maybe less so if you're with your parents. Yeah. You know, and caring for your parents. And so what are those things? And even like when we get together with my in-laws, something that we do is we play a lot of cards.
Right.
And I feel like that's the best part of their visit, because I feel like it's not so much pressure. It's like you're not staring at each other like, let's talk.
Right.
You know, like there's something that you're doing, but then it's like you end up having hilarious conversations. And you know what I mean? It just sort of takes a little bit of the like pressure off of like, how was your day, or how was, you know, because you're doing something. And actually there was a whole chunk of the first summer of COVID that Sean and Maya and I played games and cards every night.
Right.
And same thing is because it's like you're together and you're like doing something. And if you talk, it's fine. But if you're not talking, that's fine too.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that's kind of a nice thing where sometimes like if you go out to dinner and then you're like, what are we talking about? We can't be the couple that just like blinks at each other, you know?
Like, and I know at least for our situations, you know, we're around our spouses like all day, every day. So it's like, it's not like we're both, one of us is out of the house. A lot of
new information.
Yeah. We've had the opportunity to have most of the conversations already in a lot of ways. Yeah.
I will say too, that something that we do a lot is just take a walk. Yeah. And obviously it depends on his energy level, but you know, sometimes we just make it to the end of the block and then he's like, I'm good, I'm done. And then, you know, so it can be, we're fortunate to live in a neighborhood where we can just walk out our front door and, you know, walk around here. But that again, because it's like, you can talk or you don't have to talk. And there end up being things like, oh, look at that house is for sale, or look at this funny thing the dog is doing, or whatever that is. But I feel like that's some of our loveliest times is just taking walks in the neighborhood. Yeah. Because it's something we can do together, and then we're outside, and, you know, taking a walk is good for everything, every part of you. And, you know, I was like, oh, the other thing too is I think just like we've been trying to eat dinner outside in the backyard. And just even that feels better and a little fancy and a little like, you know, just step it up a minute, you know, like just enjoy that summer, but also like we don't have to go to a restaurant, you know, like let's just eat in the backyard because we have this lovely backyard, you know, just do that. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I thought of too, or Sarah brought up, reminding me of something we had done back when she was in bed. We would go on dates, and I use date kind of in air quotes because she used to like, when she was driving and, you know, not sick, she would go to Target or go to TJ Maxx and like look at the stationery, look at the cards and kind of see. She liked stopping in and just kind of doing a quick sweep and seeing, you know, what they had kind of thing. And she couldn't do that when she was sick.
Yeah.
So I would go and with like headphones and video chat, and she could shop from home in bed. And
That's
she
awesome.
loved it.
Would she be like, okay, the third one from the left?
Exactly. Yeah.
And you would buy it?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It took me a little getting, like, I felt a little weird at first. Right. But it was, I mean, it was a fun way to have her be able to connect with something that she enjoyed. It was something that we were doing together.
Yeah.
Though not in the same location.
Right.
And it was, something unique and different. So, I mean, you can kind of, I don't know. I
love that.
You can think outside the box a little bit, depending on, you know, how much energy and how accessible some of these things are to the person that you're caring for.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's ways to connect, you know, outside of both going and doing something together.
Right. Well, I think even about Sean and Maya, so they play a lot of chess.
Okay.
And obviously you don't need to move much for that. And it's one of those where like at any moment, one of them can be like, you want to play? And then just pull it out and there they go. And they also, I do not like scary anything.
Oh yeah.
And they do. And so then they watch things like Stranger Things together. And so like stuff like that at any moment they can just be like, hey, you want to go watch an episode? Hey, you want to play a game of chess? And they can connect in this really, I think those are some of their very best moments, is because they're connecting in this thing. So I'm thinking about supporters.
Yeah.
And thinking about like how can a supporter help with this kind of thing? I think I have a couple of thoughts, but do you have any ideas?
Let's start with your thoughts because I don't have anything off the top of my head.
Yeah. Thinking is just like restaurant or like Bite Squad kind of gift cards.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a great idea.
So like, so that I could say like, oh, it's because it's, again, if you get takeout, it just feels fancier. Right. And so that takes the financial and the planning piece out of it. If it's like, oh, look, somebody gave us this. Or even like we have this amazing friend who lives nearby and every once in a while just like an envelope comes flying in our mailbox in our front door and it'll have like a gift card to this little ice cream shop down that's like a couple blocks away. And so something like that like then to take the financial piece and even the planning piece.
Right.
Because I'm like, oh, well, here clearly now we know where we're going for ice cream because we have this gift card.
Right. The great thing with that too is it plays into the like not knowing when the energy will be available, but the idea, the thing is there. Like, because another thing you could do as a supporter is like, I want, you have your anniversary's coming up. Can I, and not everybody can do this, but I want to make this fancy meal for you and drop it off at your house with, some champagne or something like that. That could be a thing to do. I mean, that's a big thing.
Right.
But there are ideas there. But also then that puts pressure on like you as the caregiver and the person, your spouse or whoever it is that like, okay, we have to do this now. Like we have to have the energy and make this moment now. Eating, it's less so,
right.
And it's not every time bringing a meal is always helpful.
Yes.
But I guess maybe, what can you tack onto that to make it feel a little extra special if you are a supporter? Like, also here's some, cheesecake.
Right.
Kind of thing. That's just a thought.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So it's not just a lasagna.
Right.
A lasagna is always appreciated, but
right.
There's,
Yeah. Actually, on our 20th anniversary this year, it was like in between. Sean had a big procedure on the day before and was going to have a big procedure the day after. And we were having a party 2 days after. And so the day of, we're sort of like, well, do we do something? Do we not? Like, you don't feel that good, but it's our anniversary. And then this friend of ours, knowing that he had just had this procedure, said, I just made this homemade soup and this homemade bread and I'm bringing it over.
Lovely.
And it was like, like the bread was like warm, like fresh from the oven. And it just was like, okay. Because it felt like if we had just had like mac and cheese at home, it would have been a little sad. But instead it was like, oh no, we had this. And I don't know if they even thought about the fact that it was our anniversary, but it felt fancy and, that they could do that. I'm trying to think. I mean, another thing is for supporters is always the like, if you're a person, like if you have a kid or you have another person in your life that makes a date a little harder. Like if it's like, hey, if you ever want me to come hang out with your kid so that you can go out, and even just we can do that at the last minute or whatever that is, that I think that like to sort of, again, remove some barriers, like what are the things that we can do? Or what if somebody brought something and it was a cute, like little picnic-y kind of, I don't know, like again, brought the dinner, but it had like a little candle or had a little,
I
don't know, something. I can't decide if that would, it depends on, I think you'd have to know the people obviously and know if they would think that was cool or not. But because I'm thinking like if somebody gave me like a box of conversation starters and some dinner with that, would I be offended or would I be like, oh, that's cool? I'd think it was cool.
Yeah. Right. So those are some good ideas for supporters. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that it kind of relates to this. Going back to at the beginning, you were talking about how people don't know what to ask Sean. And it's like, because you can't ask about
work,
how his work and probably doesn't want to talk about his appointments all the time.
Right.
But in light of all of this, just a reminder to ask people, what's been exciting, and that's not maybe the right word, but what have you been doing, or what's something that you're excited about right now, and just kind of in light of, we're trying to build these things in, but like as a supporter, like ask and see what's going, what those things are, and be interested in their lives beyond just the medical and
yeah. And I think even exciting almost feels like too big of a word.
Yeah. Right.
So maybe it's even like, what's one lovely thing that happened to you this week? Because it could be like, I saw a bird out the window or whatever, And even like, what's one thing you're excited about might be a little like, I don't know, because I don't know what every day is going to be. But it could just be like, what's one lovely thing that's happened, or what's one. Somebody said, and not everybody would respond, well to this, but we had a friend who was here the other day who looked at Sean and said, how is your soul? Which with amazing Sean, then that was like all he needed to be like,
right.
Yes. Thank you for asking me a real question. So, that wouldn't work with everybody. But I think, again, often people who are going through so many things, they don't often want to have the like basic conversations anyway, because they are living on such a different plane that Sean just wants to like go deep because he's thinking about and living through deeper things. And so even if he was working, I don't think he'd want to talk about that. He wants to talk about like sort of more existential stuff,
Yeah. Right.
So,
yeah, I think another thing for supporters, like if you have if you have good friends who are caregiving or who are chronically ill, to think about, in light of, this conversation has been a little more focused on specific to the caregiver and the caree, but like that caregiver or that person who's sick still wants to spend time with you as a friend, and to think about how you can meet them where they are, in light of these limitations that we've talked about, in this need for, sometimes things have to be spontaneous, but to kind of think about how you also can kind of fit into that piece, because those connections, those human connections, are really important for people who are seemingly stuck at home, whether because of illness or because they're caring for someone. And that can be really enriching to like still have that human contact, to feel like you have that community.
So smart. Yes.
So maybe that's, having kind of an open invitation that, hey, if you feel like you have energy, I can be there in 5 minutes, and we can go grab a cup of coffee from the drive-thru and sit in the car.
Yeah.
Or I can bring over coffee and we can sit on your deck.
Yep.
To kind of, and not everyone can always have that flexibility, but just to kind of like figure out where you can kind of make that work. And because I think it's so easy for people to just not know how their lives can really intersect with those who are in our situations. But maybe think about what we've talked about and how that can apply to your relationship with us.
I love that. Because I think even about the first thing you said about just lying in bed and watching a TV show. Like if you're, close friends with a person, like, hey, I know you don't have a lot of energy these days. Is there a show you're watching that I could just come sit next to you?
Right. We don't have to talk. Together? Yeah.
Or even the parallel play thing. I have a friend who like she and her niece do that. They just like go to a coffee shop together and call a parallel play and just like sit there next to each other, And so like, could I just come and just be, I just, whatever. So I think that's beautiful to think about that as the caregiver or the supporter as well. Like we had a friend the other day who said, hey, can I come over tonight? Are you free? Could I come over at 6? And I thought 6 means we would need to cook dinner.
Right.
And so I said, we're pretty low energy today, but if you want to come over at 6 for a shortest visit, I'll give you a bowl of ice cream if you want to eat first. And so I think also that's the thing is like, I sort of gave the parameters of like, we have an ice cream amount of energy, but not a dinner amount of energy, So, oh, good ideas. Good ideas. Yeah. Thank you for this. It's been helpful to think about. And I'm going to think about the friend part too, and how this can apply to the supporters showing up. So, yeah.
All right.
Well, my friend, next time I see you, it'll be in person. And that feels incredible.
Can't wait.
So, listeners, get ready because it's just, yes, it's exciting. It's very exciting. Oh, good talk today. Thank you.
Yeah.
And continue to enjoy your break. And I will see you very soon.
Sounds wonderful. I can't wait.
Yay. All right. Bye, friend.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to In Sickness. Find us online at insickness.care or on Instagram at InSicknessPodcast. you can send your questions and comments to insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or fellow caregiver, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and take care.